Before I begin, I want to make something very clear. I don't hate Chiaki Nanami. I don't hate any of the characters in the Danganronpa franchise. There are characters I like, and there are characters I'm not particularly interested in. Characters I feel indifferent towards. Chiaki just happens to be one of those characters. Most of the fandom, however, loves Chiaki. She's probably one of the most beloved characters in Danganronpa. I understand some of the appeal. She's nice and she's cute, but considering how many amazing characters there are in this series, it baffles me how popular she is. I think the best way to explain the problems with Chiaki is by comparing her to characters inside and outside of Danganronpa. Characters who are very similar to her, but at the same time, very different. The first character I'd like to compare her to is Jack Pearson from This Is Us. If you're not interested in listening to a mini Jack Pearson character analysis, or if you don't want me to spoil the first 3 seasons of This Is Us for you, feel free to skip to the time displayed on the screen. Jack Pearson, like Chiaki, is a fan-favorite character whom audiences fell in love with almost immediately. Many fans see him as the perfect husband to Rebecca, the perfect father to the Big Three, and just the perfect man in general. Even the characters on the show go on and on about how perfect Jack is. But as The Take, formerly known as Screen Prism, stated in their Jack character analysis video, his character touches us because he's not effortlessly perfect. He's a good man, but he's still a character who has struggles, who makes mistakes. He's still someone people can relate to. Jack comes from a family of alcoholics and addicts. His father was an alcoholic, his grandfather was an alcoholic, his younger brother Nicky is an alcoholic, and Jack himself was an alcoholic. In Season 1, we get some small glimpses into Jack's drinking problem, and it's a major plot point going into Season 2 as he tries to get sober. Over the course of the show, we get some small glimpses into Jack's past. We see how his father was abusive towards his mother and neglectful towards him and his brother. Through these flashbacks to Jack's youth, we learn that he became a stand-in father figure to Nicky and a protector for his mother, constantly looking out for them and standing up to his father when the time comes. These character traits are admirable, but they're also one of his greatest character flaws. At times, it feels like Jack is smothering his brother, preventing him from doing things on his own. And it's clear that Nicky finds this very frustrating.
My own personal Superman. I'm your Lois Lane, always needing to be saved.
Jack carries this trait over into adulthood. Once he's a father, he always wants to be there for his kids when they need him. Again, this is one of the reasons why we love Jack and see him as a perfect parent. But it's still apparent when he oversteps his boundaries.
Hey, you know what? Let's crank this up.
Dad?
Yeah, baby.
I just kind of want to be alone right now.
Dad!
No, keep going. I almost got the whole thing.
Dad, I told you I don't want to be on camera.
We understand why Jack does this. He wants his kids to have a happy, fulfilling childhood because he didn't have one. He wants to be the opposite of his father. The problem is, he tries a little too hard, and again, at times it feels like he's smothering them. Not all the time, but sometimes. Another one of Jack's biggest character flaws is his secrecy and determination to suppress negative memories and emotions from his past. For example, Jack and Nicky had a really bad falling out during the Vietnam War. Nicky did something really bad, and Jack cut ties with his brother. When Jack first meets Rebecca, he lies to her and tells her that Nicky died during the war, thinking that would be easier than telling her what really happened. Jack's determination to forget all the horrible stuff from his past, his desire to get away from it and move on, fueled his alcoholism. He eventually realizes that he needs to stop running away from his past. He realizes that if he wants to stay sober and become a better person, he needs to be more open and discuss some of the things he's kept hidden from his family. He tells his kids about his drinking problem, and he tells Rebecca about borrowing money from his father when she was pregnant with the triplets, something he never wanted to share with her because he hated that he had to swallow his pride and go to his father, someone he despised, for help. Jack made great progress during his recovery, and odds are he would have eventually told Rebecca the truth about his brother and made amends with Nikki. You know, if it wasn't for... So, Jack's character has always been shrouded in mystery. Audiences knew since the early episodes that Jack is not alive in the present-day timeline. So, prior to Season 2, Episode 14, everyone was asking, how did Jack die? What happened to Jack? We eventually learned that there was a terrible fire at the Pearson home the night of the Super Bowl. After getting Rebecca and the kids out, Jack ran back inside the burning house to save Kate's dog and a few other valuables. Because he was in the house much longer than everyone else, Jack inhaled more smoke. He had a widowmaker's heart attack at the hospital and died later that night. Again, Jack's love for his wife and kids is one of his greatest strengths, but it's also one of his biggest weaknesses. In a flashback to when Jack was young, his father makes a snarky remark about how Jack never looks after himself. Jack's father was a jerk, but he was right. Jack never looked out for himself, not as a kid, and not as an adult. He wasn't thinking about his own safety the night of the fire. He was thinking about his family's happiness, and that's what got him killed. So, most people would agree that Chiaki and Jack are too good for this world. But here's where they differ. Chiaki is effortlessly perfect, a Mary Sue. Jack, on the other hand, is a character with substance. He has a lot of personality. He has strengths and weaknesses. He's done some good things and he's done some bad things. We've seen him at his best. We've seen him at his worst. We know his life. We know where he's been. And because of this, we know exactly who he is and why he is the way he is. We understand why he would want to forget his past. We understand why he strives to be the perfect father for his kids and the perfect husband for his wife. We understand why he is the character we love so much. What do we know about Chiaki? She's nice. She likes playing video games. She's a little modest. And that's basically it. We don't know why she likes video games so much. We don't know how she got into gaming. We don't know anything about her family or her life growing up. We don't know anything about her. The free time events in Danganronpa allow us to learn more about the other students. They help us understand why these people think the way they think and act the way they act. They provide backstories, and they add substance to the characters. We don't learn much about Chiaki during her free time events. Chiaki is the one who learns things from Hajime. This admittedly makes her free time events unique, but it's still a huge disservice to her character. Chiaki spends a good chunk of her free time events falling asleep and talking about games. The only character moments we get from Chiaki are subtle hints that she's an AI. It's cool foreshadowing, but in terms of substance and character depth, it's not that impressive. I've discussed the problems I have with Chiaki in the past, and in response, someone argued that because Goodbye Despair Chiaki was an AI, she couldn't have had a backstory. Now, I know Kodaka and the other writers didn't come up with the idea to make Chiaki a real person until after Goodbye Despair, but still, they could have given AI Chiaki a fake backstory to share with the other students. I mean, she was undercover, so having a fake backstory prepared would have made a lot of sense. And then the writers could have made that fake backstory real in Danganronpa 3. Which reminds me, I've noticed some people online complain that the anime, quote, ruined Chiaki's character. I don't agree with that sentiment because I never found Chiaki interesting. I see it more as the anime made people realize how simple Chiaki's character was, and they didn't like that. I will say this though, once the writers decided to make Chiaki a real person and include her in the anime, they should have used the story to flesh out her character. There should have been scenes where Chiaki talked about her past with Hajime and the other students. Just little conversations where Chiaki's opening up about anything would have been nice. Right now, all the anime has to offer in terms of expanding Chiaki's character is a very, very small character arc. In case you forgot or didn't even notice, Chiaki has a character arc in the Despair arc, but it's very simple. It happens over the course of one episode, and most of it takes place off-screen. Here's the gist of what happened. Chiaki is not friends with any of her classmates at the start of Despair arc episode 2. Her teacher, Chisa Yukizome, encourages Chiaki to use her games to make friends. Later on, Chisa enters the classroom and sees everyone playing video games together. Chiaki's friends with everyone now, everyone loves her, and that's it. We don't see Chiaki nervously approach her classmates and ask them if they want to play with her. We don't see her gradually warm up to having other people around to play with. We don't see anything like that. We just see everyone playing games, and Chiaki simply says, "You were right, Sensei. You can use games to make friends." And then the next day, she immediately becomes the class rep. Chiaki went from being a gamer who keeps to herself, no explanation for why that was the case was ever given, by the way, to being a gamer with friends who love and rally behind her over the course of one episode. Playing video games with others and eating with others is the extent of Chiaki's growth. And while these scenes are funny, they're not that impressive nor interesting in terms of character development. Seriously, compare this to Toko Fukawa becoming friends with Kumaro Naegi in another episode, Ultra Despair Girls. At the start of that game, Toko made a deal with Nagito Kameda in order to save Byakuya Togami from the Warriors of Hope. The agreement entailed bringing Komaru to the Warriors of Hope's HQ. This is why Toko tags along with Komaru throughout most of the game. As the story progresses, Toko provides emotional support and opens up about her past, both the abuse she suffered from while growing up and the terror of the 78th class killing game. Toko learns more about Komaru, occasionally teases her, but ultimately reaches a point where she cares for Komaru's well-being and is willing to put Komaru over her own wants and needs. In fact, she was willing to break a promise she made with Byakuya to help Komaru escape from Toa City. That alone speaks volumes. By the end of the game, Toko is determined to protect both Byakuya and Komaru. She's determined to escape with the two people she cares about more than anything else in the world, her crush and her first true friend. When I first watched a Let's Play of Trigger Happy Havoc, Toko was one of the few characters I was really interested in learning more about. I like her free time events, and I love her arc in another episode, Ultra Despair Girls. In my opinion, Toko is one of the best characters in the Danganronpa franchise. But for some reason, Chiaki is the one placed on a pedestal, despite lacking a backstory, a compelling arc, an intriguing personality, or any kind of depth. Sometime after the last episode of Danganronpa 3 aired, me and Russ had a conversation via text message about Chiaki and Mikoto Naegi. We noticed a few parallels between the two. They're both nice, modest people who want to trust and believe in the people around them, and their classmates perceive them as the physical embodiment of hope. Chiaki's death took place when the world was beginning to fall into despair and ruin. Mikoto defeated Junko Enoshima and helped pull the world out of despair and ruin. Honestly, I think we're meant to perceive Chiaki as the original Ultimate Hope and Mikoto as her successor. Even though these characters are very similar, I'd still say Mikoto is the better, stronger character because, unlike Chiaki, he has an arc that takes place over the course of the entire series. He deals with a lot of conflict, internal and external, and his main character trait has layers. As I said before, Chiaki's character arc in Danganronpa 3 was short and simple. Her transition from being a loner to having a bunch of friends was as quick and sudden as flicking a switch. Even the decision to make Chiaki the class rep happened really fast. Chisa asks Chiaki to be the class rep. Chiaki says no. Everyone else jumps in and says, "Chiaki, you should be the class rep." And then Chiaki's like, "Okay, fine." And that's it. That was pretty different from what Mikoto went through when he became a leader. During the very first class trial, Kyoko Kirigiri sees something in Mikoto. She sees someone who has the potential to free the other students from their situation, and she spends most of the game acting as a mentor to him, showing him how to solve each murder mystery on his own. Mikoto helps solve all the mysteries and expose the mastermind. By the end of the game, all the surviving students are rallying behind Mikoto. They stand with him as he faces off against Junko Enoshima during the final class trial. The people watching the killing game from outside the school admire Mikoto for standing up to Junko, for refusing to let her win. They see him as a hero and start to call him the Ultimate Hope, a title Kyoko dubbed. Now, at the start of the series, Mikoto describes himself as an average high school student with no unique characteristics. He sees himself as ordinary. Mikoto definitely felt nervous and intimidated by the thought of attending a school meant for ultra-talented teenagers, but I think most people would feel that way, and I never got the impression that he hated the fact that he had no talent. I never got the impression that he was unhappy with who he was as a person. Unlike some of the other characters in the series, characters like Hajime Hinata, who was willing to throw his entire identity away to become an ultra-talented being, Mikoto seems to be content with his average guy status. A little too content, if you ask me, because even though Mikoto grew over the course of Trigger Happy Havoc, even though he became a much better problem solver, even though he brought an end to Junko Enoshima, he still doesn't see himself as much of a leader, let alone the Ultimate Hope. I can't say that I blame him. I mean, he spent most of the game listening to and following other people, so when he's suddenly thrust into this leadership position, when people start looking to him for guidance, when people start treating him like a savior, he's very surprised, visibly embarrassed, and uncomfortable. He's being pushed out of his comfort zone and forced into a position, a very difficult position, he isn't ready to take on. One he might not want to take on. Whenever someone tries to praise Mikoto or treat him like he's special, he pushes back, insisting that he's not the ultimate hope, that he hasn't done anything to deserve that title. Mikoto didn't become a true leader overnight. It took time for him to move past his reservations and fully accept his role as the ultimate hope. Chiaki becoming the class rep, on the other hand, was treated like a quick and easy thing that didn't require any adjustments, which doesn't really make sense because she literally just became friends with these people. Here's what should have happened. Class 77B nominate Chiaki to be the class rep. Chiaki says she'll think about it. While playing games with Hajime and relieving his worries, Chiaki tells him that her classmates nominated her to be the class rep. She admits that she's not sure if she should accept the role because she's still getting used to being part of a group and doesn't know if she could handle being a leader. Chiaki is eventually motivated to accept the class rep position and take charge of Class 77B after Nagito is suspended and Chisa is transferred to the reserve course. If the writers had done something like this, if they had stretched that plot out just a little bit, Chiaki's transition from being a loner to being a leader would have felt like an actual transition. Chiaki becoming the class rep happened too fast and had very little impact. Moving on. Earlier I said that Jack Pearson's main character trait was both his greatest strength and his biggest weakness. Well, there's something similar going on with Makoto's character. When we first meet Mikoto, he's a kind and trusting person who's willing to lend anyone a hand. These seem like positive qualities, but the Sayaka Mizono case shows us how Makoto's trusting nature can be used against him. After the first class trial, he feels stupid for falling for Sayaka's trap. The killing game continues, and as more people die, Mikoto begins to feel conflicted. There's always a part of him that wants to believe, this is it, we're not going to kill each other anymore. But he's forced to accept the reality that he doesn't know what the other students are capable of, that he can never be certain. The conflict inside his head is tearing him apart. During the 5th class trial, he realizes that Kyoko is lying about something, but he doesn't know what her intentions are. Now, Mikoto spent most of the game working with Kyoko. She's been a mentor to him, she's confided in him, she's relied on him, and she was the one who tried to cheer him up after the Sayaka Mizono case. So, he doesn't know if he should call her out or cover for her. He doesn't know if he should betray her or give her the benefit of the doubt. Ultimately, he decides to trust her. He decides that she's not the killer and that she must be lying for a good reason. The story continues and we discover that Kyoko wasn't the real killer, that Monokuma/Junko was trying to frame her. In this case, trusting Kyoko and hiding the truth from the other students was the right call. Flash forward to when Mikoto is part of the Future Foundation. The remnants of despair are captured by Mikoto and his allies. Mikoto wants to give them a chance at redemption. He wants them to return to their former selves. So he has them placed inside the Neo World program to undergo psychotherapy. What he didn't realize at the time was one of the captives, Izuru Kamakura, smuggled a virus onto the island and planned to use it to sabotage the Hope Restoration program. A killing game takes place inside the virtual reality, and the whole thing is broadcasted to the rest of the Future Foundation. Even though things did turn out alright in the end, one could still argue that Mikoto was very careless and that maybe he shouldn't have been so merciful and trusting. Maybe he should have been better prepared for a situation like this. Flash forward to Danganronpa 3, Future Arc. Mikoto finds himself trapped in another killing game. His goal is to minimize fatalities and get everyone to work together. He reveals his forbidding action to the other characters because he wants them to trust him, and he wants to trust them in return. So, does Makoto's trust and mercy make him a wise, noble person, or does it make him a naive idealist? Is his willingness to trust people and give them a chance his greatest strength as a character, or is it his biggest weakness? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Is it hope or is it despair? Is it both? This ambiguity around Makoto's main character trait is very interesting, and it falls in line with the overall theme of Danganronpa very well. Chiaki's willingness to believe in others, on the other hand, is never portrayed as a flaw. In fact, she doesn't have any flaws. She's perfect, and that's a problem. Her lack of flaws and negative qualities makes her feel less human, less relatable, and less interesting. Mikoto is far from being the most complex and interesting character in the series, but I'd say he's got a lot more going for him than Chiaki. I want to shift our focus back to the Sayaka Maizono case for a second. Sayaka Maizono, like Chiaki, feels like the ideal girlfriend for our protagonist when we meet her. But, first and foremost, she is a character with flaws and weaknesses. One thing the first chapter of Trigger Happy Havoc got across very well was how passionate Sayaka was about her dream and how important her idol friends were to her. She admits that she's willing to do, and has done, unpleasant things to keep her dream and career alive. During the first class trial, we discover that she cared about her dream so much she was willing to commit murder and frame Mikoto, someone she genuinely cared about, someone she was genuinely interested in pursuing romantically, to do so. As Kyoko says after the class trial ends, Sayaka was conflicted. She was torn between two things she cared about, and that internal conflict added depth to her character. If the writers didn't give Sayaka this depth, this flaw, if they just made her this perfect, innocent little girl, she would have been a one-dimensional Mary Sue like Chiaki. The first case would have been a lot less interesting, and her character would have been a lot less interesting. I'm not saying Chiaki should have attempted to do something drastic or horrible, but the writers should have given her some kind of depth, some kind of conflict to deal with, just something. While we're on the subject of love interests for the Danganronpa protagonists, I recently found a Kotaku article that covered an interview with Kodaka from 2015. About midway through the article, this exchange took place. It always seems like there's a lady character designed to be the players and the main character's favorite. Kyoko in the first game, then Chiaki in the second. Is that intentional? I didn't really specifically think of any female characters as the heroine. In regards to Kyoko Kirigiri specifically, it was just the idea that she was a detective and she had a good thought process that drove her to be perceived in that role for the player. On the other hand, wanting to specifically create a heroine is what drove Chiaki's creation. So, Kodaka basically admitted that Chiaki is pure waifu bait, that he specifically wanted Chiaki to be an ideal heroine that people would just automatically love. There's no in-universe reason for why Chiaki is the way she is. Chiaki says and does all the right things simply because Kodaka decided that she should say and do all the right things. Kodaka put making Chiaki a saint over making her a unique or compelling character. When writing Kyoko, however, He didn't have this "I'm going to make everyone like this character" mentality. Kodaka focused primarily on making Kyoko a character. Kyoko wasn't designed to be loved like Chiaki was. The players just happened to like her and how she was written. If people were to ask me which lead female I prefer, I'd pick Kyoko every time. She had a presence throughout the entire game, she has a backstory and free time events that help us understand her character and motivations, and she grows over the course of the entire series. A while back, Russ and I had a conversation about Katya Komatsu from Kill and Harmony, and at one point he said something along these lines. The way the writers used her to advance the plot was interesting. The impact she had on the other characters was interesting, but Kaede herself wasn't that interesting. I think that comment also applies to Chiaki. Chiaki had an undeniable impact on the Danganronpa story. Her death in the despair arc was used to push her classmates into a pit of despair, and she was the one who motivated Hajime and gave him the confidence he needed at the very end of Goodbye Despair. I'll admit, what the writers did with Chiaki was very interesting. Chiaki herself, however, is not that interesting. She's very simple and very underdeveloped, so she feels less like a character and more like a glorified plot device. Some of the issues I have with Chiaki apply to Kaede. That being said, I think Kaede is a better, more interesting character. Similar to Sayaka, Kaede attempted to commit murder, failed, and died as a result. Kaede didn't have a selfish motive for murder, but her willingness to go to such an extreme made her interesting. Weeby News made a Kaede character analysis video a while back. She did a pretty good job talking about Kaede's murder attempt and the other character flaws that prevented Kaede from being a complete Mary Sue. That video is probably one of the reasons why I rank Kaede higher than Chiaki. It helped me see the character in a more positive light, so I highly recommend you check it out if you haven't already. So, if I had to rank the Danganronpa love interests, I'd place Kyoko at the top and Chiaki at the bottom, with Sayaka and Kaede somewhere in the middle. Prior to Despair Arc Episode 10, a lot of fans speculated what would become of Chiaki. Some believed that Chiaki would die at the start of the tragedy. Others believed that she was alive and a member of the Future Foundation. Some speculated that she was the mastermind behind the Future Foundation killing game, that she started that game in order to save her old classmates from whatever decision the branch leaders would have made at that meeting. Eventually, Despair Arc Episode 10 came along, and we learned that Chiaki did in fact die at the hands of Junko. After Danganronpa 3 aired, Weeby News made a video ranking the saddest Danganronpa moments, and Despair Arc Chiaki's death was at the top of her list. I understand why people viewed that scene as the saddest Danganronpa moment, and objectively speaking, realistically, it probably is the saddest, but that particular moment didn't leave as much of an impact on me personally because I wasn't emotionally attached to Chiaki as a character. The saddest moment for me, the one that hit home for me, was probably Kyoko's death, plus Mikoto's reaction to her death. That stuff hurt and affected me more. That moment remained much closer to my heart because I cared about Mikoto and Kyoko more. I cared about them as characters and as a ship. As I said before, I feel indifferent towards Chiaki. I don't think she's that interesting, and the series never gave me a reason to care too much about her. I only found her death upsetting because 1, it was an excruciatingly brutal scene, and 2, some of the YouTubers I like really love Chiaki, and I was thinking about how they would react the entire time. A few months ago, Russ and I recorded a video about the Yakuza Like a Dragon series, and in that video, I discussed my thoughts on Shinji's and Yumi's deaths in Kiwami. Those two didn't have much screen time, and the game never fleshed out their characters. When they died, I felt like I didn't know them that well, so I didn't feel that sad. In retrospect, yes, those were sad scenes, but only because Kiryu and Haruka, characters we got to know very well, were suffering emotionally. Well, that's how I feel about Chiaki's death in Danganronpa 3. I found it very upsetting and difficult to watch, but because I know virtually nothing about her, because she's underdeveloped, I felt more sorrow for the other characters and the fans who were affected by her death. One of Danganronpa's many strengths as a franchise is its characters. Most of them are flawed, intriguing, and complex, with interesting backstories and compelling character arcs, making Chiaki feel bland in comparison. Even some of the less fleshed out characters like Junko Enoshima and Ruruka Ando are, in my opinion, more interesting than Chiaki because even though we don't know them as well as some of the other characters, there's enough information out there for in-depth discussions and speculations. With Chiaki, there's nothing to discuss other than the fact that there's nothing there. In one of my first Danganronpa videos, I said that Miei Gekigahara was a blank slate, and that I want the writers to expand on her character in an OVA or a light novel. I want them to do something like that for Chiaki too. I mean, they've made light novels to expand on other characters. Why not make one for Chiaki? She's popular, so people would definitely read it, and I think it would benefit her character in the long run. A light novel could provide a backstory that explains why Chiaki is the person she is at the start of the Despair arc, and a light novel could cover some of the events that took place during the Despair arc. You know, help us better understand how she felt when she became the class rep, or when Chisa was transferred and left her alone with the other students for several months. The sky's the limit! Hi everyone, thank you for watching the video. This is definitely the longest scripted video I've ever posted to the channel, so if you stuck around all the way to the end, thank you very much. So, how do you feel about Chiaki's character? Do you agree with anything I had to say? Do you disagree with anything I had to say? Let us know in the comments below. Don't be afraid to like and subscribe. Check out our other videos if you haven't already. Be sure to share this video, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Bye!